In 1950, the Cold War between the United States of America and the Soviet Union grew hot. It was that year that the Korean War, sometimes called the Forgotten War, broke out and lasted until 1953. Our story starts with Mr. Kenneth Lee, born and raised in Manhattan, New York. Mr. Lee's interest in war came from listening to World War II radio channels when he was younger.
Any of us who have been following the war, because we started to follow the war because when we were kids during World War II, we followed everything that happened in battle. And we constantly knew what was going on, so we continued to follow this particular war very carefully because it was habit.
In World War II, the main enemies were the Germans and the Japanese. After the war finally ended, all of the territories conquered by Germany and Japan were split amongst the victors to help strengthen their economy. 400 miles to the west of Japan was the Korean Peninsula, only 684 miles long. The Russians took control over the northern part of Korea, and the United States took over the southern part. Shortly after the Russians and the Americans settled into Korea, another war broke out between Russia and the United States. This is better known as the Cold War.
North Koreans had crossed the 38th parallel and invaded South Korea, and at the time had pushed the South Koreans back into a pocket in the lower, I don't remember the name of the area, lower right-hand part of the peninsula. I don't remember the name, and they were trapped there. And the United States intervened at that point, and we sent our troops in to drive them back. MacArthur, contrary to the thinking that was prevalent at the time, decided to pursue them up into North Korea. This was the big mistake of the war. All right, at that point, he started to pursue against the wishes of much of the military, but he was supported by a lot of people around him who said this was a good idea. So we were pushing our troops up into that area of North Korea in the dead of winter, incidentally, and shoving them up toward the Chinese border. I was put into a troop carrier wing. We flew flying boxcars, which was nothing more than it looked like a boxcar, and everything was loaded into that and dropped from the back of by air from the back. The backs opened up and dropped. The action that we had in Korea was there was a river that had to be crossed as MacArthur was pushing north, and there was no bridge left, and our unit dropped an entire bridge in that area, which in pieces, of course, by parachute, and the engineers on the ground assembled that bridge, and it was used to cross the river there. That was the only action that outfit joined many of my friends and many others who were enlisted at that time. In fact, there were so many of us that when we went down to Lackland Air Force Base for training, there was no room for us, no clothing for us. We had to stay in the clothing we came down with. We slept in tents outdoors, and it got very cold in Texas at that time of the year. And it was 18 degrees, 14 degrees, and we were sleeping outside, and it was awful.
The 38th parallel is the one place where North Koreans stand face to face with the rest of the world. On one side of the concrete marker are the North Koreans. On the other side is the joint South Korean and American forces. Each side shows their strongest men. The North Koreans only put their well-fed top officers here. The South Koreans stack their side with men who are 5'8" or taller. Only one side is worried that their soldiers are going to want to jump across the parallel.
You can see on the North Korean side how they're set up. They have two soldiers watching each other, so neither of them defect. And then they have their leader to the north, making sure that no one else from the north will come down and defect.
On the DMZ, everyone is considered the enemy. Whether you're a North Korean resident, a soldier, or South Korean defector, we had to kill without question.
With everyone watching, no one can cross here, and trying to cross anywhere else along the border is practically impossible. After 3 years of fighting, the North Koreans and the South Koreans signed a ceasefire treaty. This meant that there would be no more shooting between North Korea and South Korea. As of right now, in 2012, the ceasefire treaty is still active.